afternoon. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. It's a beautiful day here in Minnesota. I hope it's beautiful wherever you are around the country or around the world. As always, I promise that this will be a great program, a couple of great interviews. We call it Robust Conversation. That's what we're going to deliver momentarily. Before I begin, I want to, as always, invite you to support this program by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You may be on one of several platforms. One, YouTube Inside News, YouTube Black Press USA. We're also streaming on 3 Facebook platforms. One is Al McFarlane, another Inside News. A third is Black Press USA Facebook. We also stream on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So wherever you are, first of all, say hello to us. Let us know with a comment, but also help us by subscribing. And where I want you to subscribe, how I want you to subscribe is to go to the YouTube Insight News channel, become a subscriber, and tell 10 of your best friends to subscribe with you. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. You can help us by taking that step. You become a subscriber and tell the people that you think would enjoy this conversation to join us as well. I want to also begin by acknowledging that our friends over at the Minnesota Department of Health want to remind you to continue to follow COVID-19 protocols, wash your hands, stay aware, prioritize prevention. Together, we can create awareness, encourage testing, and help everyone stay healthy. So enjoy this show. Remember, get well, get healthy, be healthy. So let me continue by bringing in my first guest today, and it's Representative Esther Agbaje. She serves the neighborhood that I'm in. She's my representative in the state legislature. She is elected to office in Minnesota House District 59B. I had a great conversation with her a few days ago when she and her colleagues, her counterpart from 59A, and their common senator, Senator Bobby Joe Champion, all made a presentation to one of our neighborhood organizations, the Hawthorne Huddle, Hawthorne Community Council, monthly meeting called Hawthorne Huddle. But it was a great presentation. Good to hear them sort of review and reveal the progress that our communities made under their leadership and with support from community to make things change in a way that's significant and substantive. So I've invited her to come back and just go into more detail about her work, her vision, and what we can do to actualize the execution of the opportunities that have been made available and that are emerging. Representative Esther, good to see you. How are you? Welcome again to the conversation. Always good to see you.
Always great to see you too, Al. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you know, I'm so impressed with you, and I smile just thinking about the energy and the earnestness with which you attack problem solving on behalf of your constituents, our community. And I think that the unique way that you do that is a way that is conscious of our shared humanity. And so while you're focusing on the particulars for people that voted for you or may not have, but they're in your district, your approach really is global and humane or humanity centric from my point of view. That's my impression. So kudos to you.
Thank you for that.
What were the highlights of this legislative session? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there were so many. So, you know, for people who don't know, if you have been watching the state of Minnesota, we were one of the few Midwestern states that saw complete control of the state government by one party. So it was the Democratic Party, which I'm a part of. And we were very excited about that. I think some people probably expected it. We definitely worked hard towards it, but making sure it was a reality, I think, was a big deal. So once we had that, we knew we had to do something with it. So one of the really cool things about our legislative session is we put together a list. The party put together a 30-point list of the bills that they wanted to achieve. And we actually achieved all of them. So I think that's a major highlight of showing how government can work, and showing that government doesn't have to be this like entity that's always blocking you, but actually can be an entity that's helping you. I think for me personally, one of my highlights is a bill that I was honored to carry in my first term and now again in my second term, the Crown Act, which Minnesota became the 20th state to pass that law. And so having that bill signing ceremony with the governor, with the lieutenant governor, and with so many members of our community who had stories to share about discrimination through their hair. And so I think that that's great. And it's great to see that movement continue to grow. Texas actually just recently passed the law and they had their governor sign it as well. So no matter if you're from a red state or a blue state, this is something that really shows that we're welcoming of our Black communities across the
Explain the
country.
Crown Act, just for somebody that might not know exactly what you mean. What's
Yeah, so
the genesis of it and what problem does it solve?
definitely. So this started, it's a national movement. It started in 2019 by Adjoa Asamoah. She's based out of DC and she coordinated with actually even the Dove company. And so they did research that showed that Black women in particular were known to be at least twice as more likely to be sent home or reprimanded because of the way they wore their hair in the workplace. This was also showing up in schools with young Black girls, that they were also either being suspended or prevented from participating in school activities because they were either wearing braids or an afro or some other type of Black, what is seen to be Black hairstyles.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been a number of these instances around the country. And so what Adjoa did is she joined with other groups across the country and worked basically state by state to ensure that states would have the ability to prohibit discrimination based on hair. They're also working at the national level to have Congress pass this law. And so far, they've only gotten it past the House of Representatives. But, we're still hopeful. But right now, California was the first state, followed by places like New York. And now we're up to 21 states in the country that have this law.
Awesome, awesome. So some of the other bills that you want to highlight.
Yeah, so for me, anyone who has followed my entry into electoral politics has always been about housing. And so I had a number of housing bills that I was very passionate about, some on funding, some on policy. One of the main funding ones that I was happy to champion this year was for first generation homebuyers. So
Mm-hmm.
these are not just first time homebuyers, but first time homebuyers who also probably came from a family whose parents did not own a home or who may have lost that home in foreclosures. We all saw what happened during the most recent
Mm-hmm.
2008 crisis. And so what this does is it provides funds in the form of a forgivable loan, and it provides up to 10% or $32,000, whichever is greater, for the person's down payment. And this down payment, obviously, as a lot of people know, houses are much more expensive than $320,000. But what this down payment program is meant to do is to be layered with other first time home buyer down payment assistance or other down payment assistance programs. So that way a person can use that along with another program they may be eligible for, or even a third program. And what we want to do is making sure that there's a variety of ways that people who want to go into home ownership, particularly people of color, because we know that history in this country of redlining and preventing particularly Black people from owning homes, that they can own a home if they want to, and that there are avenues to be able to do that. So I was really glad that we were able to see that move forward this year. We provided $100 million to local community finance organizations who work closely on the ground with different community groups, are doing outreach with our members, and are focused on ensuring that those who may qualify for a home, but because they've never seen it in their families, that they can qualify for this funding.
And other priorities, other things you worked on?
Yeah, in that same vein, for renters, because I'm still a renter, so I care a lot about that. But in our tax bill, we ensured that the renter's tax credit is going to be much simpler to take part in if you're a renter. So now it's going to be part of your income tax return rather than having to fill out a separate form. So the same limits still apply. I think the limit is about $65,000 income. But as long as you fill out your taxes, that will be, instead of just checking the box and then having to send in something later, you just check the box and you'll get that refund. So that's great. For people who are renting, say you're facing issues with eviction, you now will have a 14-day notice. So before in Minnesota, they could actually evict you on the same day. I mean, most people didn't, but there was no standard form. So now we have 14 days standard unless you live in a city that does more. And I think one of the Brooklyns has 30 days. So that's good for them. We also are making it simpler for expungements of eviction records to happen.
Mhm.
So what takes place in Minnesota, where it had been taking place, is that if you were evicted, and actually what that even meant was if a landlord even just went down to the courthouse and filed an eviction. So this is just an allegation that you owe money or that you did something in
Mhm.
the unit, but it hasn't been adjudicated yet by a judge. That would automatically go on your rental history. And so say say you won your case, or you had the case dismissed, or you had some type of settlement with the landlord, and you were ready to move out and go somewhere else, that would then show up as an eviction, which it's not because you were never adjudicated to be evicted. And so now our law says that unless you have actually received that decision that you were evicted, that should not show up on your record, and that those records also won't be public until there's a final adjudication. So I think that that will actually help a lot more people who
Sure.
are looking forward to move on to their next rental experience, that they don't have this hanging around them. Because what we've seen is when people have eviction records around them, especially when they've been records that have been resolved, it makes it much harder for them to find a place to live. And they also tend to live in poorer quality housing. So that's on the housing front. I have also been glad to be part of the varied movements to push forward a number of laws that had been things that people in Minnesota had been really looking forward to doing, like
Mhm.
restoring the right to vote for people who are formerly incarcerated, providing driver's licenses for our undocumented residents. We're also expanding our public option healthcare, Minnesota Care, to undocumented residents as well, which I think is a really good thing to ensure that all of us have access to healthcare in this state. And in our education space, we have increased the funding for education, tied it to inflation to ensure that our public schools will continue to have the funding that they need to support all of our students. And we're also going to be teaching ethnic studies in our public school system, so that way we know the histories and the stories of all Minnesotans.
That's great. Great. What about the area of economic development, business development? A lot of good things happening in North Minneapolis, and particularly your district. Talk about some of the things you may have supported or that you
Yeah,
want to support going forward.
Yeah, we definitely. So in North Minneapolis, we have a number of organizations that are focused on um, job training, workforce development, ensuring that small businesses kind of have the funding that they need to keep going, or or to expand. And this year, we were really grateful to have so many members. Not only from the cities, but particularly from the cities, to be strong champions and the chairs of our workforce development committee as well as our jobs committee. And so with their efforts, this is the first time I believe that we have funded businesses, particularly Black and Brown businesses, very heavily. So some of those things, I can just rattle off a couple of them, but we put in about $80 million to Black and Brown businesses and NGOs, particularly to rebuild some of the corridors in both Minneapolis and St. Paul that were
Mhm.
affected by the civil unrest in 2020 after
Mhm.
the murder of George Floyd. We also included investments of up to $240 million in community-based organizations, particularly those that serve Black and Brown Minnesotans. Um, and we also looked at another $6 million for community wealth building. And we also looked at $5 million for emerging developers. And so what we're trying to do is ensure that members of our community who can sometimes find it hard to find access to capital, get a loan from a bank, and sometimes even these grant programs that we had, we want to make sure that those grant programs are simpler to apply to. Of course, you're still following all the rules, but want to make sure that it's more open, more accepting of people from all walks of life, both from rural areas and from urban core, because we know that Black and Brown Minnesotans live across the state, and many of them are entrepreneurs, business owners, and they want to continue creating jobs for all Minnesotans. And so I think that this year we did a really good job of continuing to, invest those finances in our communities. And we know that they're going to go on, and because a lot of these businesses have been around for years, and we know that they're going to go on, they're going to expand, they're going to hire more people, they're going to be mainstays in their communities, they're going to be able to help build up the development in their neighborhood. So that way, especially for those who are harmed by the unrest, that it doesn't look like it's still shelled out from 3 years ago. And so we're really excited about that, and really looking forward to how many of these organizations, either if they were funded directly, or that can apply to funding through these grants, how they're going to use those funds and better our communities.
Thanks to Don Allen and Michelle Madison and James Whitfield, who are all watching the program on different platforms. Thanks for your comments, and I appreciate you all. Listen, so I want to pivot a little bit because I want to talk about this unique opportunity that you're part of the as well as the trifecta. You had the emergence of a fairly sizable, at least in Minnesota context, People of Color Caucus. Talk about that, what it meant, and how it operates, and what you think it means or meant for deliverables in this session and in the future. What are your relationships setting in place for both knowledge and capability to provide better, more expanded leadership and service to our communities?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and a great group to highlight. So I'm proud this year to be the co-chair of the POCI, what's known as the POCI Caucus, which is the People of Color and Indigenous Caucus, along with Representative Cedric Frazier. And so the two of us, along with our vice chair, have really worked hard to ensure that the House POCI Caucus has been really dedicated and focused to leading with a racial equity lens in all of the policies that we're pursuing. We also worked with our counterparts in the Senate, and we're really grateful to them because both houses have to work together, and so we were able to kind of be a united front on a number of issues. One of the things that we really wanted to ensure happen, and we learned this from Dr. Bruce Corey, who's done a lot of research about how Black and Brown Minnesotans have contributed to the welfare of Minnesota, and kind of what they should also be receiving back. And so one of the things he likes to say is the Black and Brown communities across Minnesota make up about 20% of our demographics. And so we should be receiving about 20% of what the outcomes are in our state legislature. And so we really took that to heart, especially when it came to investments, economic development, capital infrastructure. And so we wanted to ensure that we were leading and focused on that, and focused on policies and funding ideas that would get us to our 20% goal. And I think in some areas we actually reached that. We just talked about the Jobs and Workforce Development Bill. I know we definitely got close to 20% there, making sure that 20% of those funds were going to Black and Brown Minnesotans. In our agriculture budget, we actually hit 20%. So 20% of that budget is going to helping emerging farmers acquire land, develop their land, farm.
That's exceptional. I mean, because
Yes.
you don't think about farming and Black people together.
Well, we should.
We should. That's how we got here
Yeah.
to be the farm implements. But in modern times, we haven't really equated our urban presence with our relationship to farming and farming
Yes.
communities. But it's happening now. So that's
It
wonderful.
is happening. And it's good. And we're doing it both in the urban core through urban gardens and urban farms, as well as, farms out in the country. And so, I'm really excited about those funds. We have our chair, Samantha Vang, who I believe has been on the show. She's been really dedicated to that, not only for her specific community, but for all emerging farmers. And I think that's really important in a state like Minnesota, where we do have a strong culture of farming. And you're right, it's mostly seen as something that white Minnesotans do, but so many Minnesotans from so many different backgrounds have a farming background and a farming culture. And so we want to continue to support that. I think, the other things that we did too is ensuring that in our education system, not only in the K through 12 system are people being afforded the funding that they need to support all of our students, particularly those where English is a second language for them, or they might need support if they're a special education student. We want to be sure that those subsidies are being fully funded at the state level, so that way schools don't have to cut back on other programs in order to meet that federal mandate. And so that's what we're doing there. We're also at the higher education level, we are finally giving grants to allow people to enter Minnesota state schools. If your family makes $80,000 or less, you can go to college for free now in Minnesota. So that is excellent because we know so many of people in our community are sometimes denied access to education because of the high cost of education. And so we're working on finding ways to break down those barriers and ensuring that there really is equal access and opportunity for everyone in Minnesota. Trying to think what else I should highlight. There's the hard part about this session, as well as the great part about this session, is that we just push through so much.
How did you feel personally with your energy level and your expectations, and maybe sometimes pushback or horse trading? How do you process that in your daily life at the legislature?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So, one of the things people like to talk about is that Minnesota this year had a $17.5 billion surplus. But the nuance of that is that the majority of those funds, about 10 to $12 billion, were one-time funds. So this was the only year that we had to spend it. And so a lot of people thought like, oh, this is great. Like we have the surplus forever. We do not. But we did use the structural surplus, the stuff that would be ongoing. We did use that to invest in things like education, in housing, $1 billion for housing, from shelters to home ownership. We invested in our healthcare system. We invested in substance abuse disorder, mental health issues, so making sure people got the care that they needed. We are investing in jobs and economic development. So we're putting those funds there as a way to say this is a way to see ongoing results, rather than just, a lot of people say, well, why don't they just cut a check? And while that's always great, it means then you don't have stuff to move forward on into the future. And so we did provide some families with direct rebates. There are families making, I think, $75,000 or less will probably see about $250 returned to them when they do their taxes. But in addition to that, in our tax structure, we have a mix of tax cuts, revenue raisers, and tax refunds, whether that's through tax credits for your kids, if you have kids, whether that's through a renter's credit, whether that's also through property tax cuts. Particularly for our seniors, we know that is a really big deal because many people, they do own their homes outright, but what forces people out of their homes is the high cost of those property taxes. So we did put in property tax cuts there to ensure that people would know how their property taxes would increase moving forward, and that they also were not increasing at this exponential rate that they couldn't follow. So those are, I mean, and then back to the question of like, how did it feel to govern?
Sure.
I thought it felt great. So in my first term, we put forward many of these same bills, and some of them went through, but many of them didn't because we had divided government. And so a lot of it was sort of policy positioning, saying where we stood on issues, what we cared about, what we were going to continue to fight for. This was the year that we actually could do what we said that we wanted to do and that we could do. And I think people were amazed because the other thing is our majorities were small in Minnesota. And so that meant bringing together Democrats who are very conservative, Democrats who are moderate, Democrats who are very progressive, getting them all on the same page to say, Minnesotans sent us here to do a job. Minnesotans sent us here to take care of their needs, and that's what we're going to do. And so, through all the jockeying and back and forth and discussions with folks, the one thing I'm really proud of is that we stuck together where it counted.
One issue that I want you to talk about is from several different angles is the issue legalization of marijuana. Our cover story in Insight this week shows a photograph. We cropped it out of a big picture, but it was significant to see former Governor Jesse Ventura standing over the shoulder of current Governor Tim Walz as he was signing the bill making marijuana use legal for recreational purposes. Talk about that generally and and that's one of those bills that was really organized over several years.
Yes.
And each year it got kind of more and more common and more support and less resistance. But the magic number was the trifecta, where the actual voting power presided now with the Democratic Party. Talk about that process, if you would. And then two, one of the outcomes was legislation to eliminate police records associated with marijuana possession and use. That's one thing. Second thing is there has to be, or there was a discussion about how, given the economic potential of marijuana, cannabis, how do we ensure that that's not going to be just a corporate windfall for corporate producers and sellers? How do we ensure that Black people of color, are in the business in ways that are appropriate and that could deliver revenue, jobs, opportunity for our people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all great questions. So I'll start from the beginning. So the cannabis process has been a years-long ongoing process by many members of the community that saw that prohibition was not working. People were still being arrested for possession, arrested for sales, arrested for minor infractions of use. And that was leading to detrimental outcomes and adding to our mass incarceration problem in this country. And so I think the focus really of the legalization of marijuana is really less so, to me, in the way and many members of our communities talked about it, is less so about the ability to use the drug now, but really about rectifying the past, ensuring that people's records weren't following them around, especially for something as simple as possession or use, and that we were being mindful of how our laws were working and not working, particularly when it came to people of color. And so the most I think the biggest piece about the legislation is, like you said, the expungement aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what this bill will do, it will do automatic expungements where if you have a possession record or a use record, that those will start to fall off. And I think that that's really helpful. Again, give people a second chance, allow them to restart, and not allow, you know, one infraction to follow them for their entire lives.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to the setup that we have, as people who may be following this more closely know, possession and use will be legal starting August 1. You can have 2 pounds in your house, and you can have 2 ounces on your person. You can also have up to 8 plants, 4 of them flowering at any time. And and I think people will be very excited about that. As we set up the regulatory system, we have put in place, especially many members of the POCI Caucus who were involved with the drafting of this bill. We put in place procedures to ensure that there was a social equity division in the new agency that will be standing up. And what that division is supposed to do is ensure that licenses and business opportunities are going towards people of color, because those are many of the people who have been disproportionately harmed by prohibition of cannabis. So there'll be opportunities for people to get licenses at the retail level, the distribution level, the growing level, which I think is excellent, particularly for Black and Brown folks. One of the things that's also exciting is our indigenous communities. At least 2 tribes that I know of have been growing marijuana as well, and so they'll have an opportunity to be in this market. So hopefully it should not become fully corporatized. We also created a special revenue fund for community investments to come back from the taxes on cannabis. And so what we want that to do is to be a dedicated source of funding. Again, you know, rolling back into our communities and being able to do stuff with it, like advancing education, helping people get into the workforce, helping people with housing, whatever the community needs, especially those communities who have been really harmed by prohibition. Um, we also, as I talked about, have social equity licenses to ensure that more Black and Brown cannabis entrepreneurs can enter the new marketplace. And again, there's also a tribal compact agreement to ensure that our sovereign nations who have been in this business and wanting to get into this business also have the same opportunity to get in as well. So, those are just a couple of the highlights. There's a lot more in there, and I'm just really thankful to so many of our members who took that opportunity to say that, if we're going to do legalization, we're going to learn from the other states that have done it, and we're going to ensure that we're putting those who were most harmed at the front of this.
Esther Agbaje, State Representative, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I know you've got other appointments to do right now,
Yes.
so I know you keep it going. But listen, thank you, and I'm going to keep inviting you back again and again and again. I think it's wonderful to explain the process and to claim the victories, to share them so that our community can talk about them as we go. Esther, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.
It will be soon. Thank you. So thanks to Representative Esther Agbaje. She serves the District 59B here in North Minneapolis, where I am. She's my representative. And a few weeks ago, she mentioned that I was going to be talking, or did talk to Representative Samantha Vang. I'm going to be playing that interview with you. This was actually a video of an interview that I did with her, and it was an excellent interview. And it's kind of synergistic in the sense that she has the same kind of confidence and enthusiasm and a sense of gravity as Representative Esther Agbaje just revealed and demonstrates. So check this out. This is a video. You'll enjoy it, and I'll be back with you in a minute. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to have a conversation with a fellow North Sider, State Representative Samantha Vang. Samantha Vang represents the District 38B. It covers northwestern Twin Cities metro area, including parts of Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park here in Hennepin County. Samantha Vang was born and raised right here in North Minneapolis. Her parents are Hmong refugees from Thailand. She graduated from Robbinsdale Armstrong High School and from Gustavus Adolphus College with a Bachelor of Science in Political Science and Communications. And she's been serving in the Minnesota House of Representatives since 2019. She's a DFLer, a member of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. And again, she represents parts of the northwestern Twin Cities area at the state legislature, covering Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park here in Hennepin County. Representative Vang, so good to see you. Thank you for being my guest today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Al. Pleasure to be here. I'm, recovering. We just ended session last night. So this is really my first day just being home and just not have any meetings for the first time. So.
You're meeting with me, right? Yeah, right.
You're an exception. You're special. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, let's take a minute and talk about the session. Extraordinary opportunity, I think, sort of a groundbreaking opportunity with the Senate and the House and the executive branch all coordinated, DFL-led. What did that mean for you in general? And what do you think it meant for the residents of Minnesota and your constituents in particular?
Yeah, I would say, to have the trifecta is transformational. At DFLers, we've been pushing hard on a lot of important issues that we were able to get done this year that we couldn't get done for the past 4 years. I think one of the key things we talked about, gun violence prevention laws. We passed red flag, universal background checks. These are important common sense legislations that we weren't able to pass in a divided legislature, but now with the trifecta, we were able to make into law. I think, just coming from a BIPOC community, as a community of color, this is transformational for us. For many years, we will be fighting for nickels and dimes, but now with a record number of POCI legislators and chairs who are from BIPOC communities, we were able to make significant investments in our own communities as well. I'm at the agriculture chair, and I would say, like, I'm the generation of I represent the generation of farmers that has been left behind. And so, with me being ag chair, I'm able to make transformational investments, historic investments to support emerging farmers, beginning farmers, we have so much work to be done, but this is the start of it.
So what do you mean by generational farmers? Talk about that. And how did you come to that assignment as chair of the committee, the Agriculture Committee? It's an awesome responsibility and a great leadership opportunity.
Right, definitely. When I first got elected in 2018, I signed up to be on the Agriculture Committee. I think one of the reasons why I have interest in there, because not only does the Hmong community have a significant a number of Hmong farmers in the metro area, but we are also underrepresented. As well as, we have a lot of food insecurities, food deserts in the urban areas, in the metro area. And so that was my perspective, what I wanted to address moving into the Agriculture Committee. And that has been, for a long time, it has been a one-sided conversation about, rural farmers are only in greater Minnesota, it's only in rural areas. And so expanding the conversation of what a farmer looks like and what is agriculture has continued.
That was kind of a false divide, right? I mean, the discussion itself was framed in a way to keep people that should be together separate.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there was this rhetoric of there's an urban-rural divide, but I came in that there is no divide. There's a we should challenge ourselves to look at what we can do as partners. There should be a rural-urban partnership, and that is the issue before us, and how we can work together as Minnesotans to bridge across communities, and that I feel like with the surplus that we have this year and me being chair, we were able to achieve that.
Let me ask you about several specifics that come out of agriculture, finance. One is beginning farmer equipment and the infrastructure grant program. How do you think the establishment of a beginner farmer equipment and infrastructure grant program will impact the growth and success for new farmers in Minnesota? What potential challenges might new farmers face in utilizing these grants? And in answering that, give us an idea of what the farming landscape is in terms of individual, family, small farms versus the corporate farming community.
Right. So agriculture, I think Minnesota is the number one producer in agriculture. We're top on turkey, soybean, corn. Those are, and then we have strong traditional commodities farmers, and the smaller farmers. We also have small farmers, large farms, both even the livestock to dairy. And we have always been focused at least in the past 4 years that I've been working on the ag issues, on supporting the needs of smaller farmers, and how can we continue to sustain family farm operations. For beginning farmers, emerging farmers, so this beginning farmer equipment grant, we know that it's hard to start a farm because it's capital intensive. And this idea came out of an emerging farmer who has a need. We had a listening session, and she said, is there any resources, any grants to help me pay for fencing? Because I grow vegetable produce, and there's animals that come and eat my crops. And we know that for small specialty crop producers, there's no crop insurance for the crops that they're growing. And so when animals come eat their crops, that's their loss, that's their income. And so we created this grant, after hearing that story, that farmer can pay for fencing, for example. And this can also go towards, getting a tractor to help till the land, for example. And those things can be very costly, a lot of upfront costs to start a farm and to have it sustainable.
What about the cannabis opportunity, cannabis farming? How does your department, your legislative assignment impact or cover or shape what's going to be happening in the future with legalized cultivation and recreational use of cannabis in Minnesota, in our state?
Yeah, definitely. Well, now that we legalize cannabis, farmers who want to grow cannabis can definitely utilize many of the resources that we have at the Department of Agriculture. Farmers have a lot of great resources and grants. And so, now that we have a lot of an opportunity in cannabis, that's another opportunity, another market access for farmers to enter into. And we have the resources here to support farmers who want to begin those operations.
Next question is about pesticide regulations and environmental impact. So, Representative, considering the proposed regulations on pesticide-treated seed and the ban on pesticides containing perfluoroalkyl, I think,
PFAS. Yes, I can't pronounce that either. So,
well, I'm trying. Polyfluoroalkyl. So you've got the short name for that. But what are the potential implications for agricultural practices and environmental health in Minnesota? How does regulating these affect farmers and the industry as a whole?
So we weren't able to get the pesticide treated seed pass. That was one item that, one issue that we had to, in order to negotiate and get a deal, that was one issue that we had to let go. Doesn't mean that it's the end. We can continue to work on that issue the next year and coming years until we are able to get more support. But it is an important issue. But we were able to get what you mentioned, PFAS. And that is, PFAS. I'm also a member of the Environment Committee, and PFAS have become a very hot topic, an issue at the legislature, because it's forever chemicals. These are chemicals that built up over time, and it's very concerning. We had very compelling testimony. A young lady, her name is Amara, just passed away recently, and she testified, on banning PFAS because she has suffered, from cancer, and that's something. It's very important that we continue to address this. Forever chemicals are a public health concern. And so in agriculture, what we did is we look at giving authority to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture to look at identifying pesticides that contain PFAS, and to look at how we can continue to regulate those And that is something, you know, we also added the study to have the department, to give the department time and to add study into what those looks like, and if there's alternatives, pesticides that don't have PFAS to that can still help a farmer do what they need to do. And so those are we're able to get something on PFAS and to start having that conversation and hopefully drive market change so that companies can look at making more organic, natural alternatives than using forever chemicals.
What about beekeeper compensation program modifications? How will modifying the bookkeeper compensation program create changes affecting beekeepers and the overall health of the state's pollinator populations?
Right. Yeah. So the beekeeper language, a lot of it is technical, but I think the biggest change is making it easier for a beekeeper to get compensated, lessening the requirements so that a beekeeper doesn't have to wait for a long time from the department to get compensated because of pesticides, and so this is it aligns with the issues that we've been talking about in ag this year. How can we be more environmentally conscious, climate resilient, and also support our pollinators? And so this is part of the umbrella of issues that we're trying to address in agriculture.
Last question in this series that I have here is about border-to-border broadband development grants. How do you think the expansion of border-to-border broadband development grants will impact rural communities and Minnesota's agricultural sector? What potential challenges might the Department of Employment and Economic Development, for example, face in implementing and managing these larger grants? How does it affect agriculture?
Right. Yeah, well, broadband is very important. We know from the pandemic that having a connection is a necessity, not a luxury. It's an essential need. And so 80% of the unconnected communities are in rural greater Minnesota. And so providing this huge investment, $100 million, will support communities across the state who are unserved or underserved. There are also communities here in the urban metro area that also don't have the best connection. And that's also an area that I will continue to explore, and how can we continue to strengthen, because not only is it important to have connection, but access to internet. You also need quality internet too as well. And so I think with the state standards, we have better standards than federal standards in terms of broadband connection, and looking at how we continue to improve that for everybody.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm speaking with Representative Samantha Vang, a DFLer from North Minneapolis, who represents District 38B, the northwestern area of Minneapolis, including parts of Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park. Representative, let me spend the last couple of minutes here with you just talking about your personal story. We said you grew up in North Minneapolis. Talk about that. Talk about growing up. I mean, number one, let me say that I'm so glad that you're there. You are so impressive, and thank you for your voice and for your work. And I think that you talked about the value and the sea change represented by the emerging People of Color Caucus. So I want to sort of spend a few minutes before we go talking about your personal story, how you came to be a politician, and what's been your experience there, and what you see as more people of color find a way to engage, to serve not only our specific communities, but really with an intention of being there for all of Minnesotans. That's what I keep hearing again and again and again. It's not us against them. It's how we all do better. That's what comes to my ears all the time. So what's your personal story, your personal journey to service in the legislature?
Definitely. Thank you, Al. Yeah, it's definitely been a long journey looking back. It was not it's not easy. I think my first start into politics began when I was in high school. A junior high school, and I entered politics pretty naively. I didn't have a exciting summer job at that time, and so my cousin approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to volunteer for a campaign?" I didn't know what that was, what I was getting myself into, but I said I had nothing better to do, so I came out. And I did not enjoy phone banking and door knocking, but I realized there are definitely a lot of issues that we need to pay attention to. At that time, little did I know that I was also one of the first Asian American organizers. I saw how invisible the Hmong community was in mainstream politics, and that really fueled my frustration and my passion to continue to organize in the community, and that's been my route into politics, which is and since then I've been an organizer, community organizer. I ran numerous campaigns, both nonpartisan and partisan campaigns, got people elected into office, and then when this seat opened up, my predecessor, she approached me and well, actually, my community, my friends, they actually approached me about this seat, and I turned them down. I said no, because I never saw myself in that role. And it was very hard to convince myself and to see myself in that role. And it was, but I had support of my community to push forward, and I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that they were able to convince me to run, and I'm glad that I ran and won, and because we're able to see how representation matters. That year in 2018, I became the first Hmong woman elected in Minnesota House, and also the youngest. And that has been an amazing journey. And I hope to continue to keep the door open for fresh new leaders, young leaders to come through, because it's very much needed. We have a growing diverse caucus, and so much good is happening.
Describe the diverse caucus as it exists today, especially compared to when you showed up becoming the first Hmong woman in the state legislature.
Right. When before 2018, there was only a handful of BIPOC legislators, I think of under 6. And then when 2018, the DFO were able to flip the House into a majority, and that's when we had a record number of women in office, and also a record number of BIPOC immigrant legislators. And in that year, when our first class, we had a POCI Caucus of about 16 total members in the House. Yes, in the House. And then since then, we've grown. We have now about, I forgot the number. It's about at least 20 to 30, close to 30 POCI legislators of color in both the House and the Senate. And we have raised a lot of issues regarding, equity, regarding wealth building, housing, addressing housing. There's so much that is happening that we're so proud to just brag about to our communities.
How do your parents feel? How's your mom and dad and your family relatives feel about what you've done and what you've accomplished?
They're very proud. I think, I'm living, their wildest dream. I don't, I remember seeing an old photo of my dad, who was about probably in high school, in a classroom in Thailand, and it was, as a refugee, and how he, I'm pretty sure at that time, as a kid, he didn't realize that he will be here in America and have a daughter to represent him at the Capitol. So it's definitely transformational for my parents.
Have you been to Thailand yourself yet?
No, I haven't.
Do you see
I
that in
do.
your future?
Yes, I do want to visit. My parents are actually born in Laos, and then the Hmong community had to disperse and cross the Mekong River due to the war, and yeah, so I definitely have family still back in Laos. So I want to visit both Laos and Thailand, and to just see where my Hmong people used to live. So
last question, Representative, what's your vision? When you sit and dream and allow yourself the luxury, the peaceful time to simply create in your mind, to envision what could be, what do you see? What do you, what's guiding your building, the building blocks you're creating to the future?
right, definitely. Seeing how much of the issues that we've done for this year, a lot of the issues that, I think the biggest thing is that as a growing diverse caucus, we also reflect more of what Minnesota looks like. I hope that we are able to show that this is how we can work together. We can come from different backgrounds, a refugee or an immigrant from Mexico, or from greater Minnesota, for example, that we're still able to come together and work together and make good change. And I hope that, as a community here in Minnesota, we continue to build those relationships and show that diversity is our asset, and then we can work together and have a big family that really support one another. It's not about division and competition, but it's about what we can do to support one another through hard times. And I hope that that is something that we're able to show through this year, and to continue to just do good for the people.
Final question, and it's back to what you said. You indicated that with the record budget surplus, we were able to look at significant investments in community. Take the last seconds here to talk about what you call accomplishments, particularly that would be perceived as so by people of color. What do you think are some of the great takeaways that we can be really, really proud of and able to articulate, to say?
Definitely. Well, for me, as part of the AG chair, right, I created a program that does help farmers pay for farmland as a down payment assistance program. And so emerging farmers who want to get, being farmers, we know that historically our land has been taken away. It has been, and we have been left out. Getting access to land is very difficult. And so I created this down payment assistance to help farmers, especially beginning and emerging farmers who wants to start farming can buy land, and the state can help with that down payment assistance. I think similar to that in housing, right? We have a first-time homeowner down payment assistance program too, as well, that we passed, and that's an exciting thing. We've done a lot of great things in housing. We know that a lot of our communities of color are also renters, so we've passed strong tenant protections and eviction reform. And so that, should a landlord take you to court you don't get an eviction record right away. And that, if a tenant wins or if the case was dismissed, that eviction is taken off. And so that, that's important because a lot of our communities have that, and it's unfair and it's not right, and it's been used against us. And so this is something that will be really critical to continue to provide housing and maintain that building that wealth building for our communities, because we know that when when you own a home, you continue that path of
Mhm.
building that wealth for your families. And so I'm happy to see very historic investments in housing. Our leadership, Speaker Hortman, supported us by putting $1 billion in investment in housing, and that's huge, historic. It's never been done before, and so we're very happy about that. In terms of public safety, that has been an issue, especially with the murder of George Floyd.
Mhm.
A lot of great things have happened. We passed no-knock warrants where a police officer shouldn't, what happened to Amir shouldn't have happened at all. And so we're able to pass that legislation to protect families and so that doesn't happen anymore. It's dangerous both to the police officer and to the residents. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot more. I don't know.
That's a lot.
I can take all day on this, but
Yeah.
I can definitely send you like a one pager
Yeah.
of what the investments we made for our BIPOC communities,
Mhm.
and